He missed his bus that afternoon. Or maybe he didn't miss it. Maybe he chose to stay. Either way, he sat down on a beach in Adelaide, lit a cigarette, and by morning, he was dead. 74 years later, we finally know his name, but almost nothing else makes sense. December 1st, 1948, Somerton Beach, Adelaide, Australia. A well-dressed man is found leaning against a seawall, legs crossed, like he'd simply fallen asleep. No wallet, no wound, no struggle. Who leaves a body this clean? Every tag had been cut from his clothes, not torn, cut carefully with scissors. He'd eaten his last meal only hours before. A pie, a pasty, ordinary, human. He'd bought a ticket he never used. He'd rented a room he never returned to. And then he sat down on a beach and stopped existing, as anyone the world could name. This is the story of the Somerton Man. It took 74 years to learn who he was. It has taken longer to understand why it mattered so little to anyone who might have known him. Two men walking their horse along Somerton Beach noticed him first, just after 6 a.m. He looked asleep. Well-dressed, suit, tie, polished shoes, his head propped against the seawall, one arm resting on the sand. Nobody woke him. Why would you? At what point does a sleep become wrong? A jeweler walking his dog passed the same spot the evening before, around 7 p.m. The man had moved slightly since, enough to prove he'd still been alive after dark, enough to prove no one had touched him since. By the time police arrived, he was gone. In his pockets, an unused bus ticket, a comb, a pack of chewing gum, a box of matches, 2 more cigarette packets, each hiding cigarettes of a different, more expensive brand than the box itself. No wallet, no identification of any kind. Every single label on his coat, his shirt, his trousers had been removed. Wait, you don't accidentally lose every tag on every piece of clothing you own. Someone did this on purpose. The only question is whether that someone was him, or somebody else, making sure he could never be traced. The autopsy found no obvious cause of death. His organs were congested, consistent, the pathologist guessed, with poisoning. But no poison was ever identified in his body. How do you rule something out you can't even name? Weeks later, staff at Adelaide's railway station found an unclaimed suitcase, checked in the day before he died. Inside, a stencil kit, of the kind used to label ship cargo, a coat with an unusual American stitching style, thread that matched a repair on his trousers exactly, and once again, every tag removed, except for 3 items where a single name had been missed. T. Keene. Police searched for a T. Keene for months. They never found one who was missing. A name that led everywhere and nowhere at once. Wait, if someone goes to this much trouble to erase every trace of who they are, why leave a name on 3 items in a suitcase they never came back for? Months into the investigation, a searcher found something small, sewn into a hidden pocket in the dead man's trousers. A pocket so tight, police had missed it at the original autopsy. A tiny rolled scrap of paper, 2 words printed on it, torn from a book. Tamám Shud, Persian. It is ended. The words were traced to the final page of a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book of poetry about drinking, mortality, and the finality of death. Police appealed publicly for the exact copy. A man came forward. He'd found a matching Rubaiyat, missing its final page, thrown into the back seat of his unlocked car, parked near the beach, around the time of the death. Thrown in by the man himself, or by whoever left him there. Inside the book's back cover, 5 lines of letters, written in pencil, in a code no one has ever solved. Below the code, faintly, a phone number. It led to a nurse living nearby, a woman who, when shown a plaster cast of the dead man's face, reportedly turned pale and said nothing. She denied knowing him. She asked police never to release her name. She took whatever she knew to her own grave, decades later. Wait, a secret code, a missing page, a woman who went white at the sight of his face and never explained why. In 1948, at the start of the Cold War, investigators had one obvious place to look next: Adelaide, 1948. 2 years earlier, in the same state, one of the first Cold War defector scandals in the world had just broken, proof that spies were already operating in plain sight in ordinary Australian streets. The espionage theory. Picture him boarding a train alone, a coded message sewn into his own clothing rather than carried in a bag. The kind of tradecraft that survives a body search. Codebreakers who examined the 5 lines noted its structure resembled patterns used in wartime cipher work. Others pointed out it could just as easily be shorthand or a grieving man's private notes, nothing more. Or was it never meant to be broken at all? The poisoning theory. Digitalis and certain plant toxins were raised at the time, capable of causing exactly the internal signs the pathologist described, and notoriously hard to detect in 1948. The heartbreak theory. Some researchers argue for something smaller than espionage entirely. A man abandoned by the woman with the phone number, carrying a book about death and drink, choosing his own ending on a beach at night. Does the simplest theory ever get to be the right one? Or maybe the truth needed all 3 to be at least partly true. For 70 years, the case went nowhere. His body was buried under a headstone that read only, "Here lies the unknown man." In 2021, a genealogist named Derek Abbott, who had spent over a decade obsessed with this case, exhumed the body for a DNA sample. He built a family tree from hair follicles preserved under the original death mask, cross-referencing genetic databases the same way modern investigators find long-lost relatives. In 2022, the answer arrived: Carl Charles Webb, born 1905, Melbourne, an electrical engineer. Once married, his wife had left him years before, citing his temper. A name, finally. But did it answer anything? No family ever reported him missing. No one in 1948 stepped forward to claim him. A man with a name, a marriage, a career, and apparently no one left who wanted to find him,